For special right triangles, this is our second and final type. The other angle is 30, or if they only give us a 90-degree angle and a 30-degree angle, we know that the third one will be 60. If we have one that's 60 degrees and we know the other one's 30 degrees, then we can conclude that the last one is 90 degrees. So as long as we have two of these three angles, we can identify this triangle as a special right 30, 60, 90. So on a 30, 60, 90, if you guys remember from the beginning of the year, when we looked at the smallest angle was across the smallest side. So that's what we want to do first. We want to look at our smallest angle and we want to draw a line to the side that's across from it. That is going to represent my small side or my short side. Once we have our short side, finding the hypotenuse and the median or the long side will be a piece of cake. All right, so now we're going to identify my hypotenuse. My hypotenuse is always going to be, so we're going to get 2 because 2 means double, and we're going to multiply it by the short side, which is x. So my hypotenuse will always be double the smallest side or the short side. And then finally, we have the long side because we have a short side and we have a long side. Now, please make sure that you understand that the hypotenuse is different than the long side. The hypotenuse is across the 90-degree angle. The long side is just the longer of the two remaining sides. On the long side, again, we get x. And the long side is the square root of 3 times bigger. So whatever my smaller side is, we're going to multiply that by the square root of 3, and that will give us that third side. Any questions so far? All right, if you like the table from last time, across the 30 degrees, we have x. Across the 60 degrees, we have x times the square root of 3. And across the 90 degrees, we have 2 times x. Any questions so far? I'm going to show you guys a little flow chart, or I'm going to give you guys a little flow chart where whatever side is given, it'll give you arrows on what to do to that number. All right, so we're going to start with skip a couple of spaces, and we're going to do short side. Now, if our short side is known, so if we know the short side, which is my x, in order to find the hypotenuse, which is this one here, we're going to multiply the short side by 2, which means my hypotenuse is equal to the short side times 2. Okay, so now we're going to do, well, what if we want the long side and we know the short side? Well, we're going to get the short side and multiply it by the square root of 3. So the long side is equal to the short side times the square root of 3. If we know the hypotenuse, I'm sorry? Oh, so now if we know the short side, then we can easily find our hypotenuse and our long side. But what if they give us our hypotenuse and we need to find the short side on the long side? Well, to find the short side, remember we have to go backwards. If we multiply the short side by 2 to get the hypotenuse, how can we go from the hypotenuse to the short side? What's the opposite of multiplying by 2? Yeah, we're going to divide by 2, which means my short side is equal to the hypotenuse divided by 2. And once we have the short side, then we can do either the hypotenuse or the long side by doing the other two operations. Now, what if we know the long side? Well, if we know the long side, instead of multiplying by the square root of 3, right, we're going to divide by the square root of 3, which means my short side is equal to the long side divided by the square root of 3. And then now that we know our short side, now we can multiply to find the other side. So remember, we always find the short side, and from the short side, we can do miracles. Mathematical miracles, by the way. All right, are we ready to rock and roll? Let's do this. Yes. All right, here we go. Example number 1. I know you guys are gonna love this because it's kind of like the other one, but it makes you think a little bit more. All right, so remember the first thing we need to do is identify the type of triangle that we have. We have a 90 degree and a 30 degree. So what kind of triangle do we have? We have a 90 degree and we have a 30 degree. So do we have a special right triangle? Yes, we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So that means this one is 60. We need to identify our short side first. So we go to our small angle, our 30 degree angle, and we draw a line to the side that's across from it. So this side is going to be my short side. Then we identify my hypotenuse. My hypotenuse is across the 90 degree angle. There's my hypotenuse. And then that means this one is my long side. The side that we are given is the hypotenuse. I'm sorry? How do I know it's what? Oh, that's given information. So this is the information that they're giving us. I should have put the 12 first, you're right. All right, so this is the information we have. We have the hypotenuse, but what do we need first? The short side. So if we have the hypotenuse, how do we find the short side? Divide the hypotenuse by 2. So we get 12 divided by 2 is going to give us our short side, which is 6. And now that we have our short side, how can we find our long side? Perfect. We're going to multiply by the square root of 3. So we get our short side, which is 6. Multiply the square root of 3 to get my long side. And we get 6 square root of 3 after we simplify. It is incredible. All right, so go to your Pear Deck and let's go ahead and try the first problem. We have 5 square root of 3, and my 30 degree angle is here. All right, so we have a 90 degree angle and a 30 degree angle. What can we conclude about this triangle? What kind of triangle is it? 30, 60, 90. It's a special right. It's a 30, 60, 90. So let's look at our smallest angle. Draw a line across from it because we need to identify what each side is. That means this is my short side. The side across the 90 degree angle is my hypotenuse. And that means they're giving us our long side. Now, in order to go from our long side to our short side, let's look at this one. From our long side to our short side, we need to do what to our long side? Right, divide by what? Perfect, divide by the square root of 3. So to get my short side, we need to get the long side and divide it by the square root of 3. Now, if you have the square root of 3 divided by square root of 3, we get 5. So my short side is equal to 5. And now, how do we get from the short side to the hypotenuse? Multiply it by what? 2. So we're going to get the short side, which is 5, and multiply that by 2, and that gives us 10. Now, those of you that have little ways of, if you're very visual, I mean, once you identify your short side, if you go through where the 90-degree angle is, all you have to do is multiply that by the square root of 3. And then to get your hypotenuse, you multiply it by 2. So if you want to use that little diagram, you can. All right, go ahead and go to your Pear Deck so you can try the next one. My short side. The one across the 90 degrees is going to be my hypotenuse, which makes this one the long side. So if we have our long side, remember our flow chart. If we know the long side, we're going to divide by the square root of 3. We have the square root of 3 divided by the square root of 3. That gives us 4, and 4 is my short side. And then to find my hypotenuse, we want to get the short side and multiply it times 2. My short side is 4 times 2 is 8. Any questions so far? All right, that are all over the place where you can correctly identify your shortest side, no matter where it is. All right, so if this is 90, this is 60, then this one has to be 30 degrees. So then we go across the 30-degree angle, and this represents my short side. Then the side across the 90-degree angle is my hypotenuse. That makes this my long side. Any questions so far? All right, what do we want to find first, the hypotenuse or the long side? I like the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse, what do we just have to do to the short side? Multiply it by what? We just multiply it by 2. So we're going to get 6 times the square root of 3 times 2, and that gives us 12 square root of 3. And that gives me my hypotenuse. And now we get the short side. And in order to get the long side, what do we have to multiply it by? Square root of 3. Perfect. So we get 6. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which gives us 3, right? Square root of 9 is 3. And that gives us 18. In order for us to get the long side, we multiply it times the square root of 3. Now my long side is 9. We want to find the small side. So what do we do to the long side? Yes, divided by what? Yes, square root of 3. So we want to rationalize that denominator, which means we multiply the numerator and the denominator by the square root of 3. We get 9 square root of 3 divided by, remember this is the square root of 9, which gives us 3. And then we simplify. What can we divide here? 9 and 3, which gives us 3. So we're left with 3 square root of 3. Now, those of you that like the shortcut way, if you have 9 divided by the square root of 3, we want to move this radical to the top, and then you can just eliminate that radical. So this is 9 square root of 3 over 3, and again, we simplify, and we get 3 square root of 3. Either way. All right, so that means that my short side is 3 square root of 3. And from my short side, how do we get my hypotenuse? Perfect, we multiply it by 2. So we get 3 square root of 3 times 2, and we get 6 square root of 3. Any questions on that one? All right, go to your Pear Deck. Try the next one.